Hello, so today I'm going to talk about the Columbian Conflict. I'm going to start off with a little brief history and then move into the types of conflict that are involved and lastly discuss conflict resolution. So this began with La Violencia in 1948 to 1958, a 10-year conflict, and this was started by the assassination of Jorge Eliezer Gaitan, and he was a Populist Party presidential candidate who fought for the rights of the poor against the privileged elite. So you have a kind of a fight between the Colombian Liberal Party and the Colombian Conservative Party. And there was a lot of US-backed anti-communism repression at the time, especially in rural Colombia. So with that assassination, it kind of all melted. And then there was peasant-to-peasant violence in these rural areas. Modern history, we've got the FARC and the ELN against the Colombian government. So far, there's been about 220,000 dead and about 2.5 million displaced. Both sides are fighting for citizen protection and social justice, but they choose to do this through different methods. There has been a ceasefire and peace treaties that are currently being implemented and hopefully resolving the conflict here in a couple of years or so. So the FARC stands for Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia, and these are communist guerrillas against the government. This is a violent, non-governmental organization composed of militant, paramilitant, and peasant self-defense groups. They claim to fight for the rights of the poor and social justice through communist efforts. And the National Liberation Army, or the ELN, also fights alongside them against the government. But this group tends to be composed of students and intellectuals who really admire Fidel Castro's revolution and hope to replicate that in their own country. These operations are largely funded by illegal activities. So there's kidnapping, ransom, illegal mining, drug trade, extortion, and the list just goes on. This is a good example of a group that's successful against government in that they're able to fight and then melt back into the population. However, using terrorism, kidnapping, ransom, those sort of tactics for money and operations shows that this is a group that knows they don't really have enough power to win against the government. The types of conflict that are going on. First, there's a civil conflict. So this is a conflict confined within the country against two different groups fighting to stop the exploitation of the poor by the rich government. There's also guerrilla conflict because we have these paramilitary fighters and guerrilla peasant fighters in the rural areas fighting against the government, so they're able to fight and then blend back into society, back into their surroundings, and kind of go unnoticed. There's also an ideological conflict. So this is the communism versus capitalism debate. Who's right, who's wrong, who has the better ideas for our country and how the country's going to run and be successful. So conflict resolution. In 2012, formal peace talks began, and in 2016 there was a ceasefire. So the negotiations for peace rest on 5 main components. There's the FARC's future political involvement. So a catalyst for this was that they weren't being allowed to be involved in politics, with the assassination of their leader. And then also they have to figure out rebel reintegration. So how are they going to get these rebels who are against government to be successful in meaningful parts of the society? Also, illegal crop destruction is a huge issue, going back to the guerrilla tactics. Justice and reparations for those that have committed violent crimes against humanity and violent acts. And lastly, disarming the rebels and implementing peace deals. So how are we getting getting arms out of the rebels' hands to ensure that peace can actually go forward? So there's serious time invested in this conflict, so you have to put in serious time also to actually get a resolution as well. So the rebels have to turn in their arms to the UN Commission. They've just started doing that. And also, they've asked the military to begin removing landmines. So the U.S. has given $490 million in aid, and some of this aid resting on peace deals actually be implemented. There's also pledging of $80 to $90 billion or over 10 years to neglected rural lands. And these lands have been neglected by both rebels and the government, which has decreased opportunities for economic development outside of the drug trade. Both sides want peace, but they're divided on how peace should be achieved. So the first peace treaty was proposed in September 2016 and narrowly rejected because there was worry that the rebels were being treated too leniently, and they've committed serious crimes. So, in fact, both sides have committed serious crimes. So you have to discuss how are you going to deal with that. This goes back to peace and war transitions and determining how to approach law breaking in an effort to return to peace. Like, is it worth it to come down hard on rebels and risk them backing out of peace talks altogether? So do you not give any punishment, or how do you act? So in 2016, a new peace treaty was proposed that better defined these punishments, and it was passed. And since then, the FARC has began demobilizing and was expected to be fully disarmed by April 2017.